With creativity, there's some inspiration, but there's also a lot of perspiration. They do mention around, how anything we do has a lot of like as a part inspiration, but then there's a lot of perspiration. I think like with AI, art, and creation in general, it does make sense, and it has helped people to automate a lot of that perspiration part while they still get to own the inspiration part, or even co-create the inspiration part with AI. And I think it's more of a question of like how well will human computer co-creation help people in a way so that that interaction is more friendlier, is more interactive.
What's going on, people? I'm Sid, and welcome back to another episode of Lucid. The general public in the past few months has been a witness to the developments in AI and artificial general intelligence. And the primary driver for this accessibility is this company called OpenAI, the company behind applications such as ChatGPT, Dalle 2, and Autopilot. Today on Lucid, we have a guest from OpenAI who spends majority of his time working on AI models and is constantly thinking about the integration of AI into tech and society. He's also a Duke alum. Welcome to the show, Shamal.
आज की ताज़ा खबर। बेंगलुरु में रहने वाले लू और अमेरिका में रहने वाले सिड आपसे कुछ बात करना चाहते हैं। संगीतकार राजेश के साथ आपका स्वागत है लूसिड में।
What is OpenAI and what do you do at OpenAI?
Yeah. So I'm currently a member of like go-to-market stuff at OpenAI, which is again for people who don't know much about the company. It's a research and deployment AI research and deployment company. And OpenAI's mission is to ensure safe and beneficial AGI, or artificial general intelligence. Um, and I know some people have different definitions of AGI, but what we mean by AGI, artificial general intelligence, is these highly autonomous systems that can outperform humans at most economical, valuable work, and systems that can benefit all of humanity, and is accessible to everyone. And the company's mission is we believe it's very important to work towards creating safe AGI that is capable of solving a wide range of problems, to help people and society as a whole. And so, our team in particular, works with a lot of developers, enterprises, to support them along the way, to help them build amazing applications on top of our platform, and ultimately applications that can improve people's lives, productivity, and can democratize access to this technology, so that a lot of people can benefit from that.
That's great. And I think one important point you mentioned there was building systems that outperform humans. That's like the definition of AGI. So is this with human interaction or without human interaction, the products that you guys are building right now?
Yeah, good question. I think right now I would call it as human computer co creation, or human computer interaction, where there is still going to be human in the loop. But hopefully, we are building systems right now that are automation first and human in the loop second, compared to traditional technology, which is, human in the loop primary and automation secondary. So I think once these systems get more reliable, once we are able to trust its outputs, ultimately we'll need less and less of human in the loop,
Right.
and that's where like automation can be really reliable and can learn from our feedback to constantly improve itself. Um, and you can think of like AGI in general as sort of representation of generalized human cognitive abilities, in software, so that faced with an unfamiliar task, the system could find a solution. So it's not only limited to performing a single narrow task like playing chess or playing Go, but it's able to perform very high levels of tasks. And this is like in contrast to narrow AI, right? Like narrow AI, it's a lot easier to automate with,
Right.
almost zero human in the loop. With general systems, because there is expectations that it can do a lot of things, you want it to be reliable, and you want to trust it before you're completely hands off, right? So it's kind of a similar analogy to how you think about autonomous cars, right? So I'm not
Right.
sure if you've heard about like level 1 automation, level 2, level 3, level 5. Um, we can't directly go to level 5 automation, right? We need to have level 1, level 2, where you still have that handoff, you still have
Right.
that human in the loop to build the trust. Once you're comfortable, then you can have like true, self-driving, or true autonomous systems. So that's the hope, and at each incremental step, you want to unlock various benefits, so that people build confidence. Because what happens with these technologies um, is once you, for example, if you release a very powerful system like that, right, it might take a while for people to calibrate what it means. And so
Correct.
you want to have this step function along the way, so that people are calibrated with how these systems function, what they can expect out of it, and how they can help it improve.
Right. Like that was really interesting. I think the framework where you put like right now it's like human in the loop first and then automation, and you're trying to go towards the direction where it's automation first and so slowly reducing human interaction. You also mentioned about narrow AI. So, and you said it's easier, to remove the human interaction there. Is it because in narrow AI, it's there are specific constraints? It's like, the range of outputs that you're gonna get is from like one constraint to the other. Is that why it's easier, or why is it easier?
Correct. I think in narrow AI, for example, like chess, right? The environment that, so essentially, one way you can have a computer learn chess is through reinforcement learning, which is,
Right.
kind of reward the system when it makes a good move and penalize it otherwise. So the environment that there is pretty much the chess boards, and the configuration of it. So you're dealing with a very limited sense of what an agent's perception of what a world is.
Right.
And so therefore, like with reinforcement learning, right, you still have a limited set of different successive cumulative rewards that the agent can gain over time, and number of actions it can take, right? So that's one reason why, with narrow AI, it's much relatively easier to have less, human in the loop, as compared to more general systems which are capable of, doing a lot of things.
Right, very interesting. And coming to the applications that OpenAI has built so far, like take ChatGPT, Dali to Autopilot, it all works in a similar way where you provide a prompt as an user based on the output you want, and you get an output. So ChatGPT is text, Dali 2 is imagery, and Autopilot is code. What are the systems behind these applications, and how do these models work?
Yeah, great question. In a sense, like, to understand like large language models, right? I think I'm assuming, at least, few people would have some background on what machine learning is. But essentially, if you think of, GPT-3 in particular, it's the state of the art, natural language model developed by OpenAI, and it's designed in a way to generate human-like text,
Right.
by essentially predicting the next word in a sequence based on the context of the words that came before it. Right, so it gets very good at essentially predicting what the next sequence of words will be, and by doing that, it sounds very much like a human would.
Right.
And so it's essentially a machine learning model, right? It's essentially trained on a lot of data from the internet, and it uses a certain architecture called the transformer, which it uses to process that input data, or essentially, a wide corpus of text from the internet. And it looks at all of these, tokens, and it gets very good at predicting what will come next in kind of a sentence. So you give it, for example, half of your sentence, and it can, come up with the maximum likelihood of what the next sequence will be, right? Mm. And one of the key features of large language models is they're able to perform a wide variety of NLP tasks with a single model, including translation, summarization, question answering, and text generation, and so on. And so what happens when these models get very good at predicting the next sequence of words is they're not only able to complete your sentence, they're able to get good at a lot of downstream tasks like classification, summarization, things like that. So that's kind of the overview of how or what these large language models are, and why they're sort of good at completing for example, part of your sentence or summarizing something. And some people even call a lot of these LLMs or large language models the world's best autocomplete, which is sort of true in a sense, right? If you think about calculators as something that can help you with math, a lot of people refer to LLMs as sort of word calculators in a sense. That given any instruction, it can pretty much follow it like a sophomore intern would complete a task. And so that's the most powerful way to think about it.
So you mentioned context in terms of how these models can understand context and predict text as to what you might type or what you might want. So context is very abstract. So I'm guessing one part of it, how this model is learning is through reinforcement learning. Are there any other methods of how this context is being generated or produced?
And I think reinforcement learning comes, at least a lot of techniques that we use for aligning these models with human instructions. So to make sure that once these models are trained, how do you make sure they're following human instructions as correctly as you want them to? That's where you use a lot of reinforcement learning as well, to fine-tune these models to sound more human-like, and also to essentially make them follow instructions, right?
Right. And going in depth, taking ChatGPT as an example, but most of the people compare ChatGPT to Google search, and most of the people understand how Google search works. So you put in a keyword, it crawls the web to find websites that relate to that keyword, and it shows up. How does ChatGPT work, where you enter a prompt? How is the output coming out, if you had to explain it in simple terms?
Yeah, I think so. For people who are new to ChatGPT or other chat systems, it's essentially a conversational AI program that answers open-ended questions really well, right? Compatible to humans in most cases, and some people have been calling it sort of the biggest technological breakthrough since the iPhone. It is a very exciting scientific innovation and sort of a milestone, I would say, in human history. And the way it works, I think it's again, I explained GPT and large language models. It's essentially optimized for chat conversations. It's some of the similar large language model that gets very good at as I said, predicting sort of the next sequence of words and giving you an answer that sounds very human-like, but it's very optimized for a chat. And I would say it's sort of a different interface. Like today, anyone could go and use, existing large language models to maybe build a chat interface for various things, right? I think a lot of innovation comes from the interface itself and the embeddedness of the interface in how it's optimized to have these conversations, because that's the most natural way humans interact, right? Like language is a very powerful thing. And if you think about traditional search systems, like I find it very interesting to talk about this example, like you know like I've been personally using ChatGPT a lot to code and I don't know, write poetry
Right.
for some of my friends, write jokes and things like that, but also to actually understand stuff and some of the concepts that are harder for me to understand. Because what happens is, when I Google, I get a lot of information. It's essentially an aggregator, and then I have to go in several sources. I have to read through, multiple links and kind of synthesize the information. I think the key differentiation here with these open-ended conversational agents is that it can synthesize information really well, given the context and given what you want to get out of it, in a way. And so it becomes very easy for you to connect different things. It saves you a lot of time that you would have otherwise spent on going through the different sources if you wanted to learn about something. Um, and it sort of allows you to probe deeper, right? Because one
Yeah.
way I think humans learn best is by asking questions, debating with someone, talking to a friend. So just imagine with with these chat systems, you're able to probe deeper into what into the output of these systems, and you're able to ask follow-up questions, maybe something you don't understand, and you ask follow-up questions. And while doing that, you're actually learning and absorbing a lot of information, which can't necessarily be possible with systems that are just search and retrieve kind of things. Um,
Right.
so that's an important kind of distinction. Yeah, I'm really excited about this whole thing, and it's very interesting to even think how technology evolves over
Definitely, yeah.
time.
I think like my differentiation of like Google search versus say ChatGPT is like Google search is like collection, like you get like a collection of all the websites in the world, whereas ChatGPT is like curation, like it curates like an answer like a human being, as you said. Next question is like people kind of understand the developmental cycles in like current web products or like internet products, say like mobile apps or desktop apps, etc. How are developmental cycles in like in the AI field, or like for example in OpenAI, like, or what are the developmental cycles like?
Great question. So I want to take a step back and you know kind of reiterate what makes technology like truly transformative, right? It's not just a singular aspect, I think, but rather the extent to which it exerts a significant and differentiating impact on people's lives, productivity, quality of life, connectivity, etc. Um, and I want to give this background just because it's very important to understand like how development cycles are influenced. I think if consider the Industrial Revolution, right? Like it was an extraordinarily transformative epoch in which new manufacturing processes kind of changed how people went about their daily lives, and these changes enabled people to produce goods more efficiently, and as a result, it facilitated these great levels of productivity, and that led to a lot of economic growth and so on. And one of the follow-up thing was this advent of electricity, right? With materialized like many painstaking years of experience, experimentation, innovation, and work. And so a lot of these groundbreaking developments, like the Industrial Revolution, electricity, the democratization of personal computers and internet, which became very accessible over time, had very tremendous impact on our lives. And that allowed us to communicate and access information in ways we never thought would be possible.
Right.
And we're seeing similar transformative potential today, the development cycles with AI and these tools that continue to push the boundaries of what's possible. And essentially, they're influenced by reducing that marginal cost of knowledge work and acting as this force multiplier for various creative and knowledge work tasks that we undertake in our daily lives, right? Like, I imagine in the next 5 years, a lot of boring tasks that require a lot of knowledge work, even to an extent, a base foundation of creativity will be augmented, not replaced completely. I use the word augmentation. Will augment human work, will make us more productive, more efficient, and will enhance our abilities to learn, communicate, and create these technologies. So ultimately, the development cycles are influenced by essentially the people, right? Who's using it and how it's impacting people at the core sense, right? How is it changing people's lives and making it better, at least in 10x efficient, both in terms of cost, time, and value that it provides, right? And I think over time, some of these AI systems, yes, they are not perfect. People have really tried hard to break them and things like that. But I think these technologies have to be iteratively deployed to get good feedback from people so that they can be improved, not just by any single person or group, but overall as a community, right? And it's really empowering to shape this technology right now and be part of these development iterations. So I would even urge people to think about how they can be an active part in development iterations. Like, scientific progress is non-negotiable. I think we have to be part of the solution. I think there are going to be problems. They are inevitable as part of the progress, but they're also soluble.
Right.
So I think one important thing we can do, as users, as humans, is to be part of this progress and help shape it in a good direction so that it can help future generations. It can help us right now to solve some of the bigger problems that are still imperative.
Right. I think I got like three interesting points out of it, which I want to talk about. One is, you said like all these systems, the AI, AGI systems, they're gonna help boost productivity of human beings by 10x. So what are your thoughts on like future of work, and how people are gonna adopt it? Because that's gonna really impact like how products are gonna be developed in this space. So what are your thoughts about it?
Great question. I think AI will continue to play like a very big role in automation of certain tasks and processes and things that are repetitive or require like a degree of like accuracy and speed. And I think not only augmenting and enhancing human work by assisting with decision making, data analysis and other tasks, but also like I think AI has great potential to work alongside, humans to improve our overall productivity. And you're already seeing that today. I think there is sort of, as AI becomes more smarter and being able to work more collaboratively, it helps us complete tasks. For example, like, AI powered, technologies and platforms can help us, design and engineer products faster, help us understand, for example, customer needs faster, and provide like these personalized, tailored recommendations in real time. And it sort of has a potential to redefine the meaning of work, right? Like, if it's sort of, I think of it as a way that it can be, as I mentioned, like a force multiplier for our productivity and how we spend our lives. Like today, you can try these large language models to help you write something, write a blog article, or write a poem, or do math problems, or explain you different things. Like people have been using it as a personal tutor, as sort of a system that can help you, summarize these, difficult articles from the internet and maybe explain you very easily. And so there's text generation, there's code generation, there's image generation. Let's focus on these three. Like how will these three impact the future of work? I think text generation in general, it's pretty apparent as to how large language models have the ability to not only take a piece of text, being able to reason it, expand it, but also understand um, the external world and being able to reason about it, right?
Right.
So I think the true power of LLMs is not only like just text completion, but actually being able to, make, for example, external API calls, talk with the external world that it's configured to, and being able to take various actions that can help humans, right? A simple example is like, let's say, an email application that is currently using large language models. And I've been seeing a lot of amazing demos on Twitter this weekend. I think right after or during Christmas, people were just excited to try out these models. And I've been seeing a couple of demos where you just mentioned that, hey, if I get an email from Dikshit asking me for coffee, reply with this. Or if I get an email from anyone asking me for coffee, reply with this. Right.
Right.
So it's sort of a co-pilot for your email,
Yep.
which is crazy. So that's one way how, like, we spend a lot of time today just drafting emails, reading emails, and things like that. So just imagine if a system is able to draft these email responses at least to 80% of what we actually want in the email. All you have to do is edit the rest 20%. Still, it saves you a lot of time. Also summarizing emails, right? You get like sometimes long emails from someone and you want to summarize it and things like that. So that's one example, one solid example of how text generation models can help interact, help interacting with people to, write these emails, essays, things like that, and improve productivity. The next is, I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that was very interesting because I was seeing one Twitter thread where there's this person who doesn't know English, but all his clients are English. So what he did was they used ChatGPT to translate. So whatever he wrote it in his native language, they would translate it into English and then send the email. So it made his life very easy. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've seen a lot of, amazing builders, hackers trying to build great demos,
Yeah,
on weekends, and that's where you see the potential of this technology and how people are using it, right? It's not just thin wrappers around these large language models, but also people are building some deep integrations that can optimize workflows for certain industries.
right. Oh, it's interesting you mentioned like workflows for industries because my friend and I were discussing where uh, this is still the initial nascent stages of all these AI applications, and now it's going to be productized. People are going to start selling applications. Where do you think the first like wide scale usage of these applications is going to be? Is it going to be on the consumer side or is it going to be on the business side? Is it going to be B2C or B2B?
That's a good question. I have a feeling, at least it makes more sense to me for people to really go hard behind these boring industries like sales, support and things like that, and trying to rethink about some of those applications from the ground up using AI first principles.
Right.
That's where I see a lot of potential. I think B2B is definitely going to be huge, especially I think even CRMs, text preparation softwares, they're all, I think, fair game where people might try and innovate using some of these existing tools and large language models and APIs and so on to gain a competitive edge. And I think to really win, you need those deep optimized workflows, right? That
Right.
maybe think about just customer support for a second, right? There's so many different pieces to it, and it's there's so many different channels to it. So you could even take a piece of that whole pie and trying to optimize that using large
Yeah.
language models so that it becomes more robust, scalable, and you need less human in the loop. That in itself is a great example of how it can help just small companies get
Yeah.
really good at customer support.
You don't have to hire a whole customer support team to tend to that function, definitely. You also mentioned AI first principles. What are they? I have no clue about them.
Yeah. I think it's similar to the line what I mentioned about like automation first and human in the loop second. So you're
Right.
essentially just think about large language models. Like we did not have them like let's say 5 to 7 years back,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what a lot of companies did is they tried to retroactively integrate AI into their existing products to automate it, right?
Right.
So they already have a system. Maybe it's rule based, maybe it's deterministic, maybe it's just traditional software. Which is great. Solves the problem, does the job. Sure, requires a lot of integrations and work to make it more robust. Um, and then they try to as AI kept evolving, they try to integrate a lot of capabilities into their existing products, but it's still not automation first, right? It's a lot of retroactively trying to fit,
Correct.
um, but now with the AI first principles, I think people have a real shot at redefining and rebuilding industries from the ground up using these technologies, which become more accessible for them to be more robust and transition to what a lot of people call it software 2.0 or software 3.0, to build resiliency and scalability from the ground up using systems that can reason well, without requiring a lot of hard coded rules,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's not scalable, right? Like if you think of like voice assistants, right? Um, they still have a lot of hard coded rules,
Right.
and so and they don't completely sound human like, um, and they can't reason well sometimes. But we have a real shot at making systems that uh, you know are more smarter, can reason well, and can solve a lot of downstream tasks really really well. And so those are some of the key elements of what I mean by how AI first companies would essentially be built from the ground up to solve a lot of these existing problems and a lot of verticals that are currently poised for automation and innovation.
Right. And you mentioned that you work in the go-to-market team of OpenAI. And so you work with a lot of companies, a lot of founders who are, trying to use this approach. What general patterns have you seen where like, people are still hesitant to use this? What are the barriers they see to, using these applications?
Yeah, I think one big one is like around reliability and truthfulness, right? And
Right.
we know these models aren't like perfect right now. They're gonna improve over time, but I think hallucination is kind of a big problem that the industry faces today. Alignment is a big problem. So, what I mean by hallucination is, as it sounds, sometimes these large language models can produce outputs that are not completely truthful. So
Right.
they may sound confident, but it's not completely truthful, and that's a problem. That's kind of a barrier that people face. Another one, as I mentioned, is sort of alignment, where you give certain instruction to these systems or to these models, and they're not completely good at following these outputs in a way. So, for example, you ask it to give you a bullet list of points, but it maybe doesn't give you a bullet list. So that's a short example of like how alignment can kind of um, really hinder someone from building systems that are more reliable. Um,
Hmm.
and I
So,
think it's also like I think there's this thing like my biggest worry is like what we call is this um, I think it's like Brandolini's law, or like it's
mhm.
called as like a bullshit asymmetric principle, which states that it's much easier to create and spread misinformation than it is to
Right,
debunk
yeah.
it, right?
Mhm.
The principle could like certainly apply to AI, where like people might be more likely to fall for the hype or claims.
Mhm.
Um, so a lot of people think, oh wow, this is the next big thing, and there's a lot of hype, and which could distort like public perception of what technology actually capable of doing, and so that's what I worry about, like is disinformation, which can be harder to fact check.
Right. If you look like in the future of technology, like currently, like I think the major business model we have is like software as a service. So I'm guessing in the future it's going to be like models as a service, where like companies start providing models to other companies that want to build applications over it. What is going to be like the competitive edge for companies? What is it going to be? Data? Is data going to be more uh, like priceless, like more useful then? Like, what do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually thinking about this a lot over the past few weeks, and I tweeted something around this as well. I think, and this is very important for people who, entrepreneurs, startups, founders, your viewers who are interested in starting new companies in the generative AI landscape, and are thinking about, what are the key moats for, large language models or AI first applications, especially since, a lot of these models are available to a lot of people, right? So where is the key differentiation? I think in order of importance, and again, this is my view, is definitely like proprietary data is gonna be key. Like data that is very customized to your business, to your use case, and ultimately how you can use that data to improve the system over time to make it more reliable and useful, better with each additional use case or user. Great user interface. I think the one that really brings trust and reliability to users. I think a great UX is going to be a key differentiator. The third is kind of cost to serve or operationalized, right? I think that's again going to be a big thing. Like with today, copywriting is kind of a big application.
Yeah.
A lot of companies building copywriting tools, and of course people care about like costs as well as reliability. So like, what is your cost to really operationalize, to build additional features and to provide that additional value? I think fourth is going to be go to market and distribution, of course. Like, how are you going to distribute that product? What are the channels you're going to go through to make that product available? Are you going to invite just a few users to give you feedback? Are you going to make it open to all, and things like that? That's a key decision that founders and entrepreneurs have to make. I think fifth is network effects and sort of like community, which kind of sort of ties into the GTM strategy. But I think network effects is great. Like once you release this product, like how do you build that community around it? What are the positive network effects that you can get with deploying an additional iteration of your product?
Right.
And how that ties well with the other tools that are out there in the market right now. And I think the last one in my mind is the depth of integrations that you can build with these technologies. So by integrations, I mean that, you can't have a very thin layer around large language model. Like that's not, everyone can, it's very trivial to do that. People,
Right.
have been doing that for side projects, and anyone can easily replicate that if you just have a very thin layer around the large language model. You need a lot of deep integrations with external services, external data sources, repositories, etc., to provide that additional value for your particular use case, right?
Right.
So like I mentioned, the customer support scenario, right? One example of the depth of integration could be, you could take a knowledge base, either public or internal, and use that, for example, to build, these great workflows that you can use to optimize that experience, not just for people who are managing those automation bots, but also for end users and for people in that value chain. So I think that's going to be very important. One example is actually interesting, and I want to mention this. Like in terms of the depth and breadth of integrations, is imagine using large language models to augment teachers to create exam questions for students, right?
Right.
Very great examples. Very great example of like how teachers can use LLMs is like you can provide a link to the content material, and the system can fetch or scrape that content and parse it into a format that the large language model can understand. And then you ask the large language models to create questions from that content, given some preferences like difficulty level, the grade of the student, and things like that. And then you can use those large language models to write answers to those questions from the content. And maybe you have to edit a few answers, But maybe those answers can feed into the future generations of those questions to improve the whole process. So, right, that's a
Right.
very interesting example of like how you can build these integrations and workflows that can take existing sort of data sources and existing predefined data to improve the system over time.
Right. It's interesting you brought that up because one of my management professors wanted me to ask you this question, as like they were trying to get an answer for one question, and what they saw was that answer was not plagiarized, so they couldn't have like a tool to check if this was copied or not from a source. So how do you think like the future of education examinations is going to be? Because uh, like now there's like a lot of like content on Instagram, TikTok, social media where like students use chat gpt to use find answers and give their tests. So how should like people who are in the realm of education think about chat gpt integrating into education?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, this is my own personal view on this. I
Right.
think education isn't merely a transmission of information. That's what I believe. I think it has become much more than that. I do believe, yes, AI and these existing tools do enhance the value of education for others, while it can disrupt the value of education for some.
Right.
And the question is like, how efficiently will we and the education system uh, and organizations in general be able to adapt to a world where AI tools are democratized and accessible to everyone? I imagine, like I mentioned the calculator before. I imagine when
Right.
calculators initially came out, I imagine education systems would have similar questions around students becoming reliant
Right.
on calculators, not being able
Right.
to do basic math. But here we are, decades later, and it seems like calculators have not only enhanced, our abilities to do math, they have not hindered them necessarily. Yes, we today people can't do simple math. Sometimes they still have to bring out a calculator, but it hasn't stopped the progress
Correct.
it hasn't stopped the scientific progress and how we have progressed in our research around math and statistics and so on. And so in that case, if that is true, how have educators ensured that students are still able to do basic math without relying on too heavily on calculators? So I
Right.
pose the same questions to educators, like imagine these tools are available. How would you redesign, or how would you think about education in a way so that people are still able to write essays, students are still able to write their content without relying too heavily? And I think it's important for students, teachers, education system to recognize the importance of, of course, academic integrity and to work together to, maintain fair and honest learning environment. I think tools like, you know, tools like this can definitely supplement students' knowledge, right? Like I mentioned,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of back and forth with the systems. If you're talking about like conversational agents, it can actually help students debate better, ask probing questions better, and while actually fact checking, students can actually, they can essentially grade their own augmented work, and maybe
Right.
they can get better understanding it. So that's one example. And I believe in the short term, I think systems will get better at generating content that you can't tell apart from humans. And imagine on the other end, there'd be software that gets better at detecting
Right.
content that is completely generated by AI. But I think like medium to long term, right? Like I think you have to think about education curriculum design in such a way, for example, using techniques like problem-based learning, project-based learning, and inquiry-based learning in a way to like create more engaging and interactive learning experiences.
Right.
But yeah, it's essentially like, I'd have I'm very optimistic about how this can help education overall. Helps not just students but also teachers to create great, because the technology is available both sides of the end, right? Like so teachers can use it to create new curriculum, to make sure their students have more personalized approach to learning and things like that.
Right. Yeah. I think like the questions you post to educators, like those are very fascinating because education as a field hasn't been disrupted a lot, because if you see the tests, the exams, it's mostly transmission of information. And I think the main problem is because there's like a time limit, like with respect to tests, there's like not a lot of things that can be done, but with the use of these tools, it can be fastened, the whole process, it can go faster. So I think, like same as you are, like I am very optimistic. But I think like the going on the other side, on the side you spoke about like scientific progress in terms of calculator and how computers have come, all that. Let's talk about creativity. Like there are a lot of people, like say a lot of artists, a lot of designers who say that like AI is gonna destroy their creativity, because now people don't have to think about creating stuff. They can just generate it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that's a very interesting sort of discussion. And I've heard both sides, right? I've heard people who, artists who are taking this as a threat, and it sort of, um, brings up these questions of like how artists can sort of, lose some of their creativity, some of their inspiration, with tools like this. And on the other side, I think really artists who have seen this as a very, a valuable gift for them to like enhance and augment their initial creativity. I think one thing I'd like to mention is like a lot of with creativity, there's some inspiration, but there's also a lot of perspiration, right? I think this was a famous quote for someone that I forget, but they do mention around, how anything we do has a lot of like, as a part inspiration, but then there's a lot of perspiration. I think
Right.
like with AI, art, and creation in general, it does make sense, and it has helped people to automate a lot of that perspiration part while they still get to own the inspiration part, or even co-create the inspiration part with AI. And I think it's more of a question of like how well will human computer co-creation help people in a way so that that interaction is more friendlier, is more interactive, and so that systems are able to recognize what they're capable of doing versus not doing. um, I'm not an artist, but at least I've seen like I've used like text image models, and it has helped me actually bring some of my ideas and conceptions to life, where I can just
Right.
type in a piece of text. Like a couple of days back, I was thinking about interior architecture, and I was talking to a friend, and she's an interior architect, and she had never seen this technology before, and she was designing this project for a client, and I just typed in the description, and it produced just amazing images of something that you could just take great inspiration from, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's a small example of like how it can help someone provide that base layer of a
Right.
foundation layer of what they can build upon.
That's really interesting. And just to, pull back, like come to the top and think about like OpenAI applications, or the general AI applications. What are the main problems you guys are trying to solve? And why I'm asking that is the main problem, or like the main restriction for you guys to progress, is it lack of data, or like or trying to optimize algorithms and models to make it more efficient? Like where is the main issue or the main problem?
That's a great question. I think first of all, as I mentioned, like we're an AGI company, right? Like I think our key mission again is to ensure we incrementally and safely deploy these technologies.
Right.
And I think alignment is a big problem right now, definitely. As I mentioned, like the ability to make sure that these technologies are friendly to humans, they they understand and can act reasonably well on the instructions that you provide them. And it's a difficult problem. I think hallucination and alignment are two of the problems that we face today.
Right.
I would say that are sort of, you know, difficult from both, like, I think, research and empirical standpoint as well. But the ultimate goal is to build, general systems that are friendly to humans and can help humans solve a wide variety of problems, and be reliable at the same time. And when the systems are not reliable, being able to explain and be transparent about why they're not reliable back to the users, so that the users know that, okay, maybe you have to fact check certain things. Maybe this is not simply completely truthful. Maybe this is outside of realm of what these systems are able to do. So being able to know that threshold when these systems are able to complete a task versus they outright can refuse, they're not able to do, I think that's also a good skill. It's a good skill for humans as well, right? Like, if there's something that you don't know, you'd rather say I don't know rather than give an answer that sounds confident, kind of thing. So I think that is one thing. In terms of alignment, that's one other thing I want to mention that is sort of a challenge, is like human values, right? Like, one thing we want to do, or the community has always wanted to do, is like, instill these human values into these systems that we create.
Right.
Right. But that's a very difficult kind of area, because, like, we have to define what human values are, what they mean to us, and are they universal? Are they a property of all physical things? Can we really differentiate something that has true human values or is simulating to have human values? And so on. So that's with alignment, that there's another challenge of, like, how do you effectively get these models to understand our emotions well and to understand human values, so that it can be more useful for us, and these systems can work effectively with humans to augment our lives.
Right. That's really interesting. To talk a bit more about alignment, as you said, making sure that you give out the answers that are fact checked and that are truthful, that is very important. Uh, I want to make a relation between content creation and data. Like, there's been like a rise in content creation. A lot of people are putting their thoughts, their opinions online. So I'm not sure how this works, but like, if these GPT models or like AI models are taking data from the web, where there's like a lot more opinions than facts, how is it gonna affect the model, and like, what are the things that are put in check to make sure that the facts are gonna be showcased to the end user?
Yeah. I'll start with the first question. The second one, I'm not too sure of. I think that's, again, a research direction that a lot of
Okay.
people have been exploring. I think in terms of alignment, to kind of step back, as the systems get more powerful and capable, right, it's very important to ensure that, as I mentioned, they're aligned with human values and can be used safely. And that requires developing methods or specifying goals and values in a way that can be understood by machines, as well as certain methods for verifying and monitoring the behavior of these systems. And so, at least at OpenAI and a few other companies, people have been developing techniques for safe and beneficial AI. They're training these systems to use human feedback, and focusing a lot of research effort of alignments to building models and systems that are more reliable and aligned with human values, and that can look at human preferences and tune the models, essentially using reinforcement learning, like I mentioned before, to essentially make these models more aligned and overall reliable. And so as we train these models to do these increasingly complex tasks, right, like, making informed, like, evaluations of model outputs becomes very difficult for humans, right? Like, it makes harder to detect subtle problems in model outputs as these models get better. And so we ultimately, ideally want these systems to be good alignment researchers in a way. Like we want to train
Right.
these systems to be better at alignment so they can like self-correct themselves, they can learn from itself and so on. So that's I guess a brief on like why alignment is very important and why a lot of companies and research facilities have been spending time in making sure these systems are safe and scalable. Because you want a lot of these by design. Like this is not something that hey you develop a really smart system and then you think about the repercussions, or maybe there's things that you don't find, and then there's a lot of like negative consequences. And it's so much better to think about like safety alignment at the design stage and be proactive about mitigating them.
Right. That's great. Yeah. And we've spoken, in detail about like these AI models. I want to like shift a bit and go into an adjacent topic. Like, how do you think about these, the shift in technology helping growth of like, countries, especially like developing countries such as India? Like, how do you think like say companies that are building companies in India should think about going AI first and building companies that are AI first rather than like say product or human interaction first. So what are your suggestions there?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really optimistic and personally passionate about developing countries like India being at the forefront of these technologies. And um, AI really has the potential to, automate a lot of these tasks, make things more efficient, especially like in places where resources are limited, right? Yes, you have a lot of labor, but still
Right.
the resources are limited. One example is like in India, AI can be used to, of course, like improve agriculture productivity, improve like traffic flow, manage energy consumption, and anything that is sort of resource constrained and resource intensive, being able to optimize it so that those resources are used efficiently and being saved for future generations. Energy consumption on the same end. I think AI can really help, for example, keeping machines and infrastructures running longer and avoid like costly breakdowns, which can really help in making sure that your resources are well preserved. That's one example. Healthcare is huge, right? Like where in India and developing countries you find like access to doctors and specialists is very limited. So AI can be used for like medical diagnosis and to make recommendations for treatment like based on patient symptoms. And maybe some of these conversational systems, although it's really high stakes to use them in medical context, it can give you at least something rather than nothing at all, right? Like for people who are at remote locations who don't have access to doctors and just want to know like if their symptoms are worthy of going to an
Right.
emergency facility versus not. Some of these systems can really help that at scale, right? Because that's again the the proximity to a lot of these facilities, especially in some of the remote villages in India, is kind of a challenge, and also cost, right? Because to visit someone physically, for example, an expert or a technician or a doctor, it's very expensive for some of these people. They cannot afford it. But with these systems that can scale and be available to a lot of people, where you're scaling things with compute and not people, you can actually reduce that marginal cost of intelligence and expertise so that it can be accessible to a lot of people in developing countries.
Right.
But the flip side is like there's of course a lack of data infrastructure. That means that many countries may not have the data they need to have to make most out of it, and that's why like countries like India and other developing countries have to really invest in that infrastructure to make sure there is a good foundation for entrepreneurs, for government to build on top of these technologies and scale these applications. Um, and so I think
Right.
that's again a key. Like along with like infrastructure and policies, data is key to make this work. Um, and I think India has a real chance to be at the forefront of this technology. I think in a sense, if you look at the past 10 years, now we have really amazing SaaS products in India. There's great talent to build it, um, great resources in some places. With AI, I think now that the world is shifting towards this new AI first principle and AI first companies and industries, I think India has most of the things to shine there and can really lead the revolution of how AI can dramatically empower India's workforce, make them more productive, and bring that marginal cost of uh, productivity
Correct.
down, and help with India's economic growth and GDP overall. Um,
So talking about that, like, so most like talking about talent, most of the people who've been like educated right now in universities, like especially in computer science, there has been a slight shift where like people are learning more about machine learning, artificial intelligence, but primarily the focus is on writing like programming software for mobile or desktop applications. So for people who are in their 20s or like in undergrad, like how do you think they should think about like one contributing to this field, and two, like what are the skills they need to learn to go into this field?
yeah, good question. I think awareness is going to be the key. Like any high school student, any undergrad should know about how AI systems function at a very high level because they'll be using products more and more that help them with their daily tasks that they're interacting with. And so knowing at least at a high level of what that means and when they should not use them, when and when should not they rely on them, is a very important thing to know about. Because that's a decision that each individual has to take, whether AI can optimize their workflow, can augment their creativity, or they can maybe um, destroy their creativity in a certain way. That's a human decision, and so you need to be aware of what these systems are capable of doing. Um, I think we saw the same thing with, I think, programming in general, where, like, 10 years back, everyone wanted to learn to code and program,
Yeah,
and now you're seeing this AI hype, but everyone wants to learn more about AI. And I think it has helped in a way for a lot of people to learn about coding and programming as it becomes more prevalent. And now it's funny, these programs are helping you code and to almost like, to a very very decent level. Like it's a very good programmer, better than average probably at this point. But at the same time, I think to be able to truly benefit from this technology, I think knowing about it is crucial. Ultimately, the career choice depends on their passion, right?
right.
I wouldn't chase the hype, I would chase the passion. So if people are really hungry about knowing about AI, they really love how it's evolved over time, and some of the aspects are, inspired by biological evolution and so on, they should pursue it, sure, and they will have a very rewarding career. But they shouldn't pursue it just because it's a hype and they're going for the next big thing, because ultimately you need people that are managing these AI systems, or even like doing other creative tasks that
Right.
provides the domain expertise to ultimately train these systems. So it's going to be a shift in how we see different jobs in the future and things like that. But my advice to, I think, students and especially young professionals is to invest their time in knowing about this technology, spending some time uh, at least at a high level learning about uh, how it's different from traditional software, and the essence that it's not truly deterministic, how it's
Right.
still stochastic, and you still need your own human judgment to fact check. You still need your own human judgment to be able to give good feedback, and so on.
That's great. I think we are close to time. So before we end this conversation, I have one last question. Like taking like a 10-year time frame from now, what is your personal opinion of where AI is gonna be in like 10 years from now?
Wow. I'm optimistic about AGI.
Right.
So I have a feeling in 10 years, we might have maybe something close to AGI
Hmm.
that we can use for a lot of general tasks, and something that is very reliable for a lot of different things. I think with specific domains, and this is just my prediction, over the next 10 years, at least in 2030, at least 40 to 50% of the code that people write to create software would be co-created with AI.
Right.
And, on that line, one thing I love that Sam Altman mentioned in one of his interviews is like this differentiation around like the tools that are used to create scientific progress and scientific progress itself, right? So for the next 10 years, sure, if we get a system that's close to AGI, we'll have essentially a lot of great tools to enable scientific progress. And then itself, I think scientific progress will take that even further.
Right.
But I think I have a very optimistic feeling of like, in 10 years, if you have a system that gets really good at right, good at our current jobs or what we currently do, maybe we get to pursue more fulfilling things and things that we actually like doing,
Right.
uh, instead of some of the boring things that we do. So maybe we spend, as I mentioned, like the inspiration versus perspiration,
Perspiration.
maybe that can be flipped. So we spend more time on inspiration and
Right.
very less time on perspiration. That can be
Hmm.
automated. And so I see a lot of like knowledge work type of jobs being completely automated next 10 years for sure, reliably. Um, and people can pursue more fulfilling things, spend more time with their family and loved
Hmm.
ones, and ultimately have, AI agents helping them in their daily lives, whether it be, scheduling appointments, whether it be writing emails, whether it be running businesses, whether it be, maybe talking to a doctor and things like that. So that's my hope. And again, I'm more on the optimistic side, and I do believe that like scientific progress has taken a huge leap forward with AI in general, and we have a great opportunity to make that future possible.